Welcome to What's Going On, the weekly podcast and videocast of First United Methodist Church in Yankton, South Dakota.
Hi, and welcome to this week's episode of What's Going On. I'm Pastor Katie here at First United Methodist Church, and I'm glad you could join me for this episode. I'm going to get a few housekeeping things out of the way, and then I want to share with you kind of the work that I've been doing the last couple of weeks in particular. So in the last 10 days or so, I have really kind of leaned into some of my conference roles with some trainings and things like that. And I would love to share with you kind of the things that are in discussion, the kind of things that I do, so you can learn just a little bit more and maybe peek a little bit behind the curtain of what it's like to be clergy. But before I do that, like I said, I want to get a few housekeeping things done and out of the way so that you are aware of it. And if you're someone who, only listens to 5 minutes of the podcast, that you hear it. We are kicking off fall. It's happening. This Sunday will be September already, which is just bananas to me. But I'm also very excited. We're kicking off. One of the things that I've been very intentional about for this year is to really work on offering a variety of discipleship options to try to engage as many people in the church as possible. I really believe and feel very strongly that every person in the church should not only be involved in corporate worship with the church in some capacity, but also involved in some sort of smaller group or volunteer opportunity. If you are connected to our church, you should have received in the last couple of weeks a letter in the mail from Danny Fromm, who is our member care staff person. And one of the roles that she does is recruit volunteers for things like greeting, ushering, and fellowship time. And that's all centered on our corporate worship together. Please fill those out and turn them in. It gives us an idea and a thing for her to pull from, and it's not like super demanding. So there's options on there for, I could greet once every few months or once a month, or I could offer fellowship once every 3, because if we all do something, then there's nobody that has to do something every week, which is often the case of, oh, well, they like to do it. We'll just let them do it. Well, let's all pitch in and do this together. This is a community thing. This is a team thing. So if you can turn those in and give her that info, that would be awesome. The second thing, this coming Tuesday, we'll start our Tuesday lunch study new series. They've been on hiatus since their reading the Bible this summer. This summer marked the 4th summer of reading through, and we actually read through the entire Bible now. It was 4 books. Each summer we did a different book that was a different chunk of the Bible, and that's a pretty big deal. And then they deserve a couple weeks off because they had a lot of homework for that class over the summer. They're going to be doing a study on the book of Judges around humility and finding peace, which seems like antithetical to the book of Judges, but there's a lot we can learn from that. And that's a video series. That's Tuesdays at noon. And then not the first, but the next Sunday, we will start our Disciple Fast Track. That's Sunday mornings at 8 o'clock. I will be making coffee and providing, I'm going to say, not a healthy breakfast. It's going to be like donuts or something. But if this is something you're interested in, this book is about $15. If you haven't ordered it yet, I know there was a deadline on that, but if you're like, you know what, I really do want to do that. I really do want to commit to that. Please come. The first week is introduction stuff anyway. And if you come the first week, we can order you a book, and I can make a way for you to get on track. So please know that there's still time to sign up for that if you are interested. The other thing I want you to be aware of is at the end of September, we're going to be doing pastor book study. This is the book that we are reading for the month of September. It is called Practicing the Way by John Mark Comer. And so I've started it a little bit. It's very good. Very practical. But this is, again, if you're like, I can't commit to an every week thing, once a month, you got a whole month to read this book. Again, it's not like a deep theological thing, very practical, very convicting as well, though, I will say. So I'm not going to use the word easy read. It's easy to understand. It's hard to live out. It's probably the best way to put it, but this is what we're doing. You can find this book it's at Barnes and Noble in Sioux Falls. I did notice that the other day when I was there. Also, you can get it online. So that's what we're doing. If you have a book that you think that we should read for Pastor Book Club, let me know. I've kind of got a pile that I'm going to be pulling from, but I'm always happy to add to that to read pile, as is any good uh, book lover. All right, so those are obviously 6 of 5 confirmation has started, youth group has started. If you have a youth that is in middle school or high school, I highly, highly, highly recommend getting them signed up for DAC Youth. DAC Youth is a little bit earlier this year than normal, so I think the deadline to sign up is in September. But it's Skit Guys. It is Matt Rawl, who is he's one of the premier leaders and writers right now in the Methodist Church, which is like a huge coup that we got him. And I forget who the band is, but Skit Guys alone is worth going. But Matt Rawl, that's a huge one. And if you as an adult are like, I would go listen to Matt Rawl. I mean, I'm even like debating like, is it worth me going? Because that would be fun. Get them signed up, talk to Tiffany, and yeah, it's gonna be great. So that's coming up as well. Also, Soup Kitchen has been announced, the date. I believe, let me get my calendar out here. I don't want to tell you the wrong date. So it's going to be in October. They moved it to a Tuesday last year, and that worked pretty well. Soup Kitchen's on October 22nd. Now, Lydia did want me to tell you that although on Sunday she announced that we would be bringing back lunch, it's just not really feasible. So we're going to stick to just the evening meal, but we are for sure bringing back Country Kitchen, Country Store. I knew that didn't sound right. And that is the crafting, the canning, the whatever selling market thing. I know that in the last couple of years when we've done it, as I've stood up front, people were like, where's your country store? So that's coming back, which I am over the moon about. So be on the lookout. There's going to be signups coming up for that, for donations, for volunteering, for all the things. So you're going to want to make sure that you get your spot, the spot that you like to work in, and signing up early for that. Yeah, Men's Night Out. It's coming up this September 11th, I believe. And that'll be out at Mark Mooney's shed at 310 Piper Street behind the bowling alley. So brisket, I think, is on the menu. Can't go wrong there. United Women of Faith, they're meeting in September. And they have Linda Fox coming to talk about women in the military. Linda spent a good portion of her life in the military. That'll be fascinating and interesting. So you're not going to want to miss that. Lots of things. Like we are like full steam ahead. There's also 6 of 5, the meals looking for donations. And so there'll be sign-up sheets in Wesley Hall for donations, monetary donations, and also food donations. But look on the sheet to see what she's asking for, so that we are not being wasteful in what we give and what we use. There's also new food in our Care Casserole freezer. I think Asian meatballs and some soup. So they went through the last round pretty quickly. It's very popular, and I'm grateful. It seems that this is meeting a need that is in the community and in our church. And so what a blessing. If this is something that you are grateful for, you can always, write a little donation to Care Casseroles to help supplement the cost of these meals, because we don't charge anything. And also, if you have containers that you've gotten from Care Casseroles, you can wash them and return them, and they can use them again. So just keep that in mind as well. All right. Housekeeping out of the way. So I was gone for a couple different trips this last couple weeks. August was a blur for me, honestly. Big blur. I spent about 5 days down in Atlanta, Georgia. Never been to Georgia in my life. I was prepared for hot and humid, and it was lovely. It was like low 80s, beautiful. And then I came back to South Dakota, and it was hot and humid, and I was like, what? Not at all what I expected. And I was there for Board of Ordained Ministry quadrennial training. So This summer, I took a new role in that I am now the chair of the Dakota's Board of Ordained Ministry. This is basically, you can think of it like our credentialing body for pastors. If they want to be ordained, they have to go through quite a rigorous process in our church. In some churches, if someone wants to be ordained, like the church will just ordain them. Like, hey, I have a calling. Great, here you're ordained. Um, that's not us. That's not us at all. I would say we probably have one of the most extensive processes, and there's good and bad things about that. I would argue that one of the good things about it is you don't make it through that process without a clear calling or clear having been equipped. And I think that's really important. At the end of the day, the thing I care most about when I think about our pastors, I care about our pastors. I care that they are um, equipped for ministry, that they're prepared, that they've been poured into, that they have clear ethics and boundaries and calling and understanding of what the job is and how to do it and how to serve effectively. Um, so there's a lot to that. And the process, I think, helps to make sure that those things are in place and the requirements. Um, so let me just walk through, like, if you feel a call into ministry, I'm going to walk you through how it worked for me. And again, everybody's process is a little bit different, and mine is also a little bit different. Um, and then, which will lead into kind of the conversations that we had in Atlanta. So, and maybe you've heard this before, but I think it's helpful to understand that when you receive a pastor, especially if you receive someone who is ordained, that they have they've been affirmed by a great number of people. They have been tested and evaluated, and you can trust that they are here for the right reasons to do the job and that they've been equipped to do the job well. Um, so if you receive an ordained person, sometimes people feel like, what's the point of ordination? I feel like there's a lot of value to it, apart from, it's a calling from God. But so if you feel that calling, or you get to a point in your life where you felt that calling for a long time and you finally are ready and willing to accept that calling, which I think is probably more accurate. I would say that that is true for me. I did finally accept my calling into ministry when I was doing youth ministry, which, I mean, that's classic me. Like, I have to be doing the thing before I can realize that I can do the thing. I hope I'm not the only one out there that's like that. And so the first thing that, so I finally articulated it. I was at church camp. And the first thing I did was start to test out, okay, this is what I'm starting to think. And so I went to the director of the church camp because I used to work for him. And I said, hey, I'm starting to think that this might be what I should be doing. How does that sound to you? And he was like, I think that that's right. And I was like, oh, okay. And then I went to my parents. I remember leaving camp and driving home. My parents live like 10 miles from the church camp. And I said, hey, I think I'm supposed to be a pastor. And their response was, it's about time you figured that out, Katie, which, ouch. My parents are blunt in a very loving way. And so the next thing is to tell your pastor. And so I remember going back up to my pastor in Millbank, who I worked for. Again, I was a youth pastor at this time. And I said, I believe that God is calling me into ministry. And he said, yeah, which is really great to have. Again, like with the process, you're going to have over and over again people speaking into your life, which I find very helpful. And so after I met with my pastor, um, he told me, where to start in the process and needed to alert the district superintendent. And so I wrote kind of my statement of faith and kind of what I felt like was happening in my life and why I believed that God was calling me. And I met with the district superintendent. And so she got me into the candidacy process. Part of the candidacy process, so that kind of got the ball rolling, is that I had to meet with the SPR of the church, and they had to vet me and kind of witness to whether or not they believed I would have this calling. And so I did that, and then they approved me. Praise the Lord. And then the next step in the local church was that it went before Charge Conference. So every year we have an annual meeting called Charge Conference. Ours is usually in the fall. And the Charge Conference would vote on their experience of me. And you also had to be a member of a church for a year to be a certified candidate, which I was at that point. And luckily, Charge Conference said, yes, we see this in you as well. I'm like, thank you. It probably helped that, again, I was in youth ministry at the time. So they had seen me in a ministry role at that point. I was starting to understand that youth ministry is ministry. For me, I always felt like they were two separate things, but they're not. They're just ministry to a specific group of people. And then I was given a clergy mentor, a candidacy mentor is what they're called, who are clergy. I had one right in Milbank, and I would meet with her every month, and we would go through this workbook and talk about callings and understanding what that meant and understanding ministry and different things. And then for me, the next step was seminary. And so I went back to seminary. I'd been to seminary once before, but I hadn't gotten my MDiv. So I went back to seminary and got my MDiv. Oh, also, right before I went back to seminary, I met with the District Committee on Ministry, shortened known as DCOM. And DCOM, so after my time meeting with my mentor, having been approved by my charge conference and the SPR of the church, then I go before the District Committee on Ministry. And they have to approve you to certify you as a candidate, which they did, praise the Lord. And then I went back to seminary. Now, at this point, there are people who will then go to licensing school and take on a church as a local licensed pastor. I did not. I went to residential seminary in Chicago. And I only was there for 2 years because, again, I had been to seminary before, so I transferred some of my credits. That's an unusual thing. There's not many pastors who require going to seminary twice in order for them to get it into their head what is happening. After I graduated seminary, I came back. During that time, met with the district committee each year to be kind of, again, recertified as a candidate. And then once you are finished with your seminary education, you can, if the district committee can recommend you to go before the Board of Ordained Ministry, the Conference Board of Ordained Ministry, to apply for provisional status and commissioning. And so that's what I did. And I met, in order to do that, you got to turn in transcripts, you have to do psychological evaluations during this process. You have to turn in, there's book of discipline, like theology questions you answer. You have to write like a Bible study. You have to do you have to record a sermon. You have to, there's like a whole laundry list of things that you have to submit. And then the Board of Ordained Ministry, which is a group of clergy and lay people from the conference, review all of your stuff, and then you go before them for interviews. And the way the interviews are structured is you meet with they also have a site interview that comes, or interviews wherever you are, and the people that are involved with you. So when I was in seminary, they met with my professors, they met with my site supervisor. I was a chaplain intern at the time. What do you see? What they're looking for at that point does she have giftings for ministry? Is the potential there? Is she solid in her education, or whoever's, in my case, her education, right? And then the interview day, they interview you as preacher, as theologian, as person, and as leader. These are different dynamics of the pastor. Again, making sure that you've got the preparation needed. We are one of the only denominations that have this provisional status time. And I think of it kind of, I liken it to like a doctor in residency, right? So they're going to be pastors and they are working as pastors, but they're under supervision. Um, I think it used to be called probational time, which sounded like they had gotten in trouble. And so now it's provisional. Um, we have a minimum of 3 years of provisional time after commissioning. Um, and there's two tracks for ordination. There's ordination as an elder, which is what I am. That's what, your typical church pastor is, an elder. And we also have a deacon track. Deacons serve they're not itinerant. They don't get moved by the bishop. They don't get appointed in the same way. They find their own work. Often, maybe they'll be on church staff, maybe they're chaplains, maybe we have deacons in our conference who one is a high school English teacher, but they work in the intersection between the church and the world, drawing people in, doing more specialized ministries, and things like that. During provisional time, I was appointed to a church and I was working, and then also doing trainings. At the time, they were provisional trainings. Now we call it Clergy Leadership Academy. And then you can, after 3 years, you can submit more paperwork to the board, and you go through another interview process. This time looking for fruits of ministry. How's it going? What do we see? Is this person effective? What are areas that maybe they still need to grow in or pay attention to? And then if the board sees fitness for ministry, then they can be ordained, and become full members of the conference. So it's a whole process from the moment that I said, I think God is calling me into ministry. That was beginning of August 2011, to the time that I was fully ordained was June 2017. 6 years. And I cut off a year seminary because I'd already been to seminary once. 6-year process. That's a lot. So now I am the chair of the group that is the credentialing group for the Dakotas. Now you have to understand that there are things that are by book of discipline that across the board, every conference has to have in place and implement. But there are also things that how that gets done looks different. And we are a small conference, not small geographically, but small in population, in number of churches, in number of clergy. And so some of the ways that we handle things are a little bit different than some conferences that have much larger populations. And so I went to Georgia last week to learn a little bit more about all that the Board of Ordained Ministry does and is responsible for. Because not only are we a credentialing body, we are also the body that upholds clergy excellence. And so one of the things that we are responsible for is required ethics and boundaries training every 4 years. Every United Methodist clergy serving in any capacity is required to take boundaries and ethics training. And this is very important. There is a unfortunate reality that there are a number of people who've been harmed by their pastor, by leaders in the church, due to the trust and power that pastors hold. And so it's very important that pastors are constantly on guard and aware and diligent about setting good boundaries, and being ethical in their behavior and being mindful of how what they say and what they do affect other people. And that's where I was earlier this week in Pierre, at that training. So one of the things that we talked about in Atlanta, it wasn't the bulk of what we talked about, but it was a curious thing for me. And I, of course, think about it in a different way than someone maybe who's not been ordained. is one of the realities in the United Methodist Church, especially even since I have come into ministry, is the rise in the number of local licensed pastors. And so the journey that I just shared with you was my journey into ordination, which was very much the route presented to me when I felt the call into ministry. Um, at that point, which again is only 10 years ago, 15 years ago at the most, if you were under the age of 40, you were told to go to seminary. You need to go to seminary. And I was like, great, you need to pay for it if I'm gonna go. I mean, I could at the time, I was still single. It was easy for me to uproot and go, and it was fun. It's a fun adventure. But not everyone can do that. And we've had a rise in second career pastors, people being called into the ministry later in life. It's actually becoming the exception to the rule to find people coming out of college going right into seminary, where that used to be much more prevalent. Uh, and so there was an exception, especially for later in life clergy or people experiencing a call into ministry to get something like a local license for ministry, which meant that they could serve a local church as a pastor, but their license was only effective for that church or that charge that they were in, meaning that they couldn't preside over sacraments or weddings or funerals or baptisms um, outside of that local church. They couldn't act as a pastor outside of that local church. And if they ever stopped serving that local church, they would cease being a pastor. Um, and that exception has been there for a long time. In the last 10 years in particular, that exception has become almost the norm. In our conference, we are sitting at right around 50% of our clergy, our local licensed pastors. Um, which is a large number. Um, and and you need to understand that we have some incredible local licensed pastors, but that's a different journey. Um, and so the way that that might look, and again, these are all contextual to the person, is maybe they receive a call into ministry, they let their pastor know, they go through that candidacy process that I talked about with the SPPRC and the local charge conference and meeting with the district superintendent and getting a candidacy mentor, and then going before DCOM. But I mentioned that one of the divergence is then going to licensing school and then taking a church immediately. And so licensing school is another thing that the Board of Ordained Ministry is responsible for. Basically, it's this like ministry boot camp. So there's work to be done prior to, and then they spend a week together, and it's like intensive trying to get the basics of preaching and teaching and Methodist like polity and like to get people like prepared to like dive into a church. Is this a replacement for seminary? Absolutely not. But you need some basic information before you're going to step into a pulpit effectively. And then the understanding with local license is that they will go get education while they are serving in the church. That is the expectation. That is the rule. Now, there are two options for that. One is to go to seminary and pursue a full Master's of Divinity while serving in a local church. The other option for local license is something called Course of Study, and there's you do Course of Study 1 and then Advanced Course of Study. Again, doing those classes while you are serving the church. So you're getting your education in, but like piecemeal, right? You don't start the church with your education complete. You're doing it while you are serving the church. You're learning as you go. You can start to see differentiation there, right? But the question became at our conference of what is our theology of ordination, especially with the rise of local license and people choosing not to pursue ordination even once they get their Masters of Divinity, partially because of the itinerant vow. Local licensed pastors do not serve itinerant in the same way. But then they also, if they don't accept a call to go, then they cease being pastors. Where my ordination and my license for ministry isn't tied to a specific church; it's tied to my ordination in the Dakotas Conference. So even if I am on a leave or something, I'm still a pastor. I still retain my license. Um, but I really feel like we are in a time right now where we have an opportunity to restructure our church in a way that's more efficient, in a way that allows us to do ministry better now in the culture and time that we are in, because we still carry a lot of like heavy bureaucracy with us that maybe is not so necessary. So it's an exciting time because I feel like this is our opportunity to there's a phrase, it's like never waste a good crisis. This is our opportunity to make something of everything that's happened and to move forward um, healthier. And so anyway, I mean, if this is all interesting to you, it's definitely interesting to me, and that this is like, my life and my calling and now work that I'm doing. But it is a trend that I've seen, and I'm curious as to the layperson's perspective. Do you even notice a difference? Do you even know when a pastor comes in, if they are fully ordained, if they are in the provisional process, if they're local license, and what is expected of them? What has been your experience of that? Um, I'm one that tends to really appreciate accountability and expectations and structure, um, and I think it's important. And one of the reasons that I'm in the United Methodist Church as opposed to other churches is the hierarchy that we have, that all of our pastors are held accountable to the district superintendents and the bishop. Your behavior will be dealt with if it is inappropriate. And I think that really helps with the kind of temptation that some pastors have in other structures and systems to kind of become the end all be all. The buck stops with me. You can't challenge me. I'm in charge of all of this. I don't have that in the same way because I have someone going, whoa, hold up, that's not healthy. Don't be doing that, or the way that you are, and the churches also have recourse that if their pastor is not behaving in a healthy way or doing things in a healthy way or causing harm, the church also has recourse to call the conference and to get support and help, and maybe to have the pastor removed if that is what is needed. And that's one of the benefits of our system that other churches don't have. And so again, I'm someone who's a big fan of that. Um, I don't believe in like lone ranger pastors. I just don't think that's healthy. I think we're all meant to be in community with one another and to be held accountable somewhere. And I think that our system, as flawed as it can be at times, it does that. And I think that's important. And so that's some of what I do and what I think about when I'm on trips like this. I also just, learning best practices. Again, I want for us to have the best pastors, the healthiest pastors, because they're going to serve the church effectively and lead our church and our people into discipleship with Jesus Christ and move our mission forward. I I want pastors to succeed and to be what God has called them to be, but I'm going to hold them to a high standard because it is an important calling to be set apart in this way. And there is a lot at stake. And so it's important to me that the pastors that are being ordained in our conference have been called by God, have been willing to submit themselves to do the work, to um, ready themselves for the role that they are walking into. It's it's a privilege to do what I do, uh, and it's an honor, but it's also a challenge. So I feel very passionate about that. Um, our churches deserve the very best, and that's what I want to give them. And our people deserve every opportunity to rise to that, and most of them do in beautiful ways. So it's pretty cool. Um, but yeah, that's a little bit about, and then just on the flip side, ethics and boundaries training. Healthy boundaries make healthy pastors. Healthy pastors make healthy churches. And so talking about how, there's always going to be more work to be done than what we have time to do. People are always going to expect pastors to do and be everything everywhere all the time. That's just the way it is. You have to understand that there's hundreds of people and one me. And there's only so much that I can do. There's even only so much our staff can do. And we are blessed with some incredible staff people that really fill in the holes of where I cannot be and what I cannot do. And I'm grateful to all of them. And I hope that you are as well, and that you are letting them know that we really work here at First United Methodist as a team approach. Um, and I couldn't do it without all of you and without all of them. And so, uh, but it also means, protecting my Sabbath. If you are unaware, I take Fridays off typically, unless there's a funeral or something. Like this week, I might work a little bit on Friday just because I've been out of the office and things have been crazy. Uh, but typically I take Fridays off, which means if you try to meet with me on a Friday, you're probably going to hear me say, unfortunately, I'm unavailable. And that is because that is my Sabbath time. Saturdays are my family day, unless it is a wedding or a funeral. And again, those are kind of exceptional things. Um, I'm not going to be available. That's the only day of the week that my family is all together. So that is my time there. And if I'm going to be, I have to honor my calling as a wife and a mother as much as I honor my calling as a pastor. Too often, and I've known many pastors' kids, too often pastors were expected to sacrifice their family at the altar of the church. And when I came into ministry, that was one of the things I was unwilling to do. There are times where I miss things for the sake of the church, but that's going to be on my call. Because my family is important too, and that's a calling just as much as being here is a calling. Um, but there's also a lot that I do and a lot that I try to be here for and be available for. But know that there are times I'm unavailable, and it's not that I don't care about you; it's that I care about you enough to care about me and to make sure that I'm in a healthy place. Um, I also, try to establish good boundaries around caring for myself. Vacation is one I'm not great at and I'm working on, but you might be hearing more about that moving forward. Every pastor has 4 weeks of vacation in the year, and we are really encouraged to take all of that. I do it kind of piecemeal most of the time because I often have like sick kids, so I might be out of the office here and there. Um, but trying to be more intentional about giving myself breaks in that way. Um, that was one of the things I heard. And again, trying to model that for you as well. Be intentional about what you say yes to. Say no so that your yeses can be a yes. This is one that is a challenge, um, but it's so important. And one that I really care that you make sure. I want you to find the thing in the church that you're going to say yes to, because I do expect that you say yes to something because you're part of this and we are all a part of this. And it's not everyone else's job to do the thing for you. It is our job all together to work together so that we all have our spiritual needs met and that we can extend the kingdom of God. But you don't have to say yes to everything, or you don't have to say yes because no one else has said yes. I want you to find the thing that gives you life and say yes to that and commit to that and to be present for that and to make sure that you didn't say yes and then never show up for it, but then say no because you've already said yes. Maybe there's 2 or 3 things, and that's okay. I don't want you doing 10, 20 different things in the church. I don't want you to be here more than I am. I want you to be healthy, because if you are doing all the things, you're going to get burnt out. And then I won't have you at all. And I'd rather have you in strategic places where you're doing the most good and that it's filling your heart and soul. And I expect everyone to find that. It's when the bulk of the church does the bare minimum, they're doing themselves a disservice because you're not experiencing the transformative power of God, but you're also doing a disservice to the people around you who feel like they have to pick up the slack because they're going to get burnt out. and they're going to have a bad taste in their mouth about the church, and that's going to hurt their spiritual development as well. So let's care about each other and all find the area where we're meant to be. And it's okay to try things out and be like, that was cool, not for me. Let me try this. I am 100% okay with that conversation. Yeah, I did that. I don't know if that's right, but I want to try this other thing. Great. Let's have you try this other thing. What I don't want to see is, I don't know. I don't know what to do. Nothing. I did that for a while. I didn't really like it. I'm just not going to do anything. No, keep trying. Keep trying. I'm here for you. I will help you. That's my job. So, I don't know, this has probably gone on for like an hour. So I hope that this podcast finds you well. Hope to see you in worship. This Sunday, we're starting a new series called Crazy Faith. It's going to be really fun, and hope to see you there. Until then, have a great Labor Day weekend, and God bless. Thank you for joining us for this episode of What's Going On, a video and audio podcast of First United Methodist Church in Yankton, South Dakota. We'd love to have you join us for worship on Sundays at 10 a.m., either in person or via our live stream, which can be found at our website, www.firstumcyankton.org, or by searching First UMC Yankton on YouTube.